Good evening, everyone. It is 5:30 and we are ready to begin. Welcome, everyone. This is our September regular board business meeting for the month of September. I will start with roll call. Director Zavala?
Here.
Director Decker?
Here.
Director Barrows?
Here.
And Director Smith?
Here.
Okay, thank you. Before we get started, I'm just going to establish a couple expectations for tonight, just to keep things moving smoothly. We have a lot of speakers. First, masks are a requirement. This is a legal requirement. We are on school property. You must wear a mask. Secondly, this is a business meeting. We do expect civil, respectful behavior. So please do your part and we'll make this a good meeting. If you are signed up to give public comment, you're here to address the board and we appreciate that. Please don't engage with the audience, and audience, please don't engage with the speakers. Okay, cheering or booing, that's a disruption, it's a form of intimidation. We want to keep things moving along. If there is disruptive behavior, I am going to recess the meeting. If the behavior persists, I am going to have to adjourn the meeting. I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Snell for a welcome and introduction.
Thank you, Kyle. Welcome everybody to our first board meeting with school in session. We've been in session now for a couple weeks and it's been great to have students back in person. Lots of positive energy around that amidst a lot of challenges still with logistics and trying to navigate the start of the school year. Today's meeting, we're hopeful that we'll have a positive meeting as we have in the last couple meetings. Want to remind folks that when we do the public comment to just be respectful and listen. Everybody is coming here with perspective and we recognize that people have different perspectives and sometimes you feel moved to either respond in some way of support or respond in some way of a disagreement, and that really just doesn't allow everybody a chance to share. So would really appreciate people minding that. And then finally, again, we are required to have masks in here. I understand that people have different perspectives about that and really appreciate people cooperating with that. I know that we've tried to make sure that everybody understands the reason behind that in this meeting tonight. And we would like to continue successfully having in-person meetings. And so we do need your cooperation to make that happen. So with that, I'll turn it back to you and we can get started.
Thank you. Our first item on the agenda is public comment. We will start with our Zoom public comment participants first. The first person is Alicia Meadows.
Can you hear me okay?
When you're ready, state your name.
Alicia Meadows.
You have 3 minutes.
My belief is that our young, healthy, beautiful children that God created shouldn't be wearing face masks because it is considered abuse under the Washington State Legislature RCW 9A.16.100. We are causing more harm to our littles by making them wear masks and causing them more problems breathing, with 6 times more amounts of carbon monoxide coming out. The number of deaths in the United States from January 4th, 2020 to September 4th, 2021 is 338 in the age group of 5 to 18. Now, if you disagree with me and think that I should keep my children home, that's your opinion, and that's okay. However, in Washington State, every child has the right to a free and fair education with no discrimination based on the belief that we all know that Zoom classes did not help our children. It only set them back. The CDC doesn't currently require masks in school. The only one that requires it is Jay Inslee. It's only a recommendation. The only person that requires the face mask is our governor. As for the teachers at Minnehaha School, where do you guys get these people from? Last year, my 3rd grader had a teacher that told him that it was not okay for him to be white and said that he is different than all the other skin colors in his class. Also told him that it's okay to peacefully and unpeacefully protest. Why should my child feel like it's not okay to be white? I am not racist. I have many friends that are different colors. It doesn't stop there. I looked on the teacher's Facebook and found that there was pictures of her with an abortion on her shirt saying pro-woman, pro-choice. His teacher this year has an imaginary dog with a leash and collar. She thought up a spell in her head and told the kids that she made her dog come back to life as an invisible dog. Another teacher this year told my son that her son and his boyfriend are going to be getting married. Why should I have to tell my child what it is to have a gay marriage? This is completely against our religion, and why should I have to explain it at all? Minnehaha is the biggest joke. All of the teachers that I've come across there, I've found something to have wrong with them.
Thank you. Before we continue, I did neglect to read the citizen comment, just detail around it. So please bear with me. I'm just going to go over and outline kind of our expectations. Citizen comments is the time in our meeting where the board and administrative staff like to hear comments from the public. If you wish to address the board, you may sign up outside. You may continue to sign in during the meeting, during the Zoom comments, and then I'll make a last call. Because most matters require fact-finding and review, the board is not able to respond to any public comments made at this time. Additionally, the state's Open Public Meeting Act restricts deliberation on topics that are not on the publicly noticed agenda in advance. If follow-up action is necessary, the board will ask the superintendent to work with the administrative team to consider the information and respond accordingly. As a regular business meeting of the board, we expect the audience to conduct themselves professionally and courteously. Additionally, speakers are expected to be respectful. Personnel complaints and personal attacks are not permitted. The board asks that personnel complaints be submitted in writing. We ask that you approach the podium and state your name and address. For the record, you will have 3 minutes to make your comments. If you hear a chime, please conclude your remarks. If you have materials, you may pass them to Pat in the back of the room, and she will make sure the board gets them. This information will be provided to both the superintendent and the board. The board appreciates, listens, and cares about the broad range of perspectives in our community, and we thank you in advance for your comments. Excuse me for not doing that prior to the first comment. So next we have Zoom comments. So again, you may sign up through our Zoom comments, and then we'll be doing a last call. Our next speaker is Taylor Downham. Welcome. Please state your name and you'll have 3 minutes.
Hello, my name is Taylor Downham. I am addressing the school board today in regards to a concern I am having about a statement my student had made. As our children's school, you are responsible for providing a safe environment for our children to provide learning and growth and equality, ensuring no discrimination as prohibited by Washington State Equality and Civil Rights Law, in which we greatly appreciate. As all of our teachers are mandated reporters, I'm surprised this has not been brought to your attention. By Child Protective Services definition, abuse of a child, as it states by Washington State Law, RCW 26-44-020, and I quote, maltreatment of a child by any person under circumstances which indicate that the child's health, welfare, and safety is harmed. Abuse and neglect does not include the physical discipline of a child as defined in RCW 9A-16-100, end quote. Although RCW 9A-16-100 clearly states, and I quote, it is the policy of this state to protect children from assault and abuse, to encourage parents, teachers, and their authorized agents to use methods of correction and restraint of children that are not dangerous to the child. However, the physical discipline of a child is not unlawful when it is reasonable and moderate and is inflicted by a parent, teacher, or guardian for purposes of restraining or correcting the child. Any use of force on a child by any other person is unlawful unless it is reasonable and moderate and is authorized in advance by the child's parent, guardian, or for purpose of restraint or correcting the child. The following action is presumed unreasonable when used to correct a child: restricting or interfering with a child's breathing. End quote. My student has expressed struggle to breathe in a mask multiple times and even cried out to multiple teachers. In closing, this is me notifying you, the school board of Vancouver Public Schools, that you're allowing child abuse acts by mandated reporters, and we will no longer allow it. As a parent or guardian not allowing your force of masks being worn on my student, that is considered to be child abuse, as I have stated above, which should allow for exemption of wearing a mask if the parent or guardian chooses to do so without discrimination or segregation in the classroom. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Rob Anderson. Mr. Anderson, you may state your name and begin when you're ready. You have 3 minutes.
Hi there, my name is Rob Anderson, and I wanted to bring to your attention a situation. I was out on Skyview campus last week where I was assaulted and I was robbed in broad daylight in front of Vancouver Public School DROs, District Resource Officers. What's interesting is what came about of this in the events of investigating and following up, and I discovered some very disturbing realities. And that is that Vancouver Public Schools has a rogue police force, armed police force, at the behest of teachers and administrators that feel no accountability to the public or to Washington state regulations. When I specifically asked them, Skyview DROs said that the RCWs don't apply to them. That's a problem. And sorry, so someone said I'm sideways. Sorry about that. So that's a problem where you have officers, district resource officers, that feel like that they're above the RCWs. And when I talked to Dave Bennett on the phone and also some email exchanges, who's the head of security for Vancouver Public Schools, he was unaware of these RCWs that would apply, because zero of the DROs would properly identify themselves, which by RCW 18.170.070, they are required to provide identification and to show that identification. What happened was, as I was on the sidewalk, I got attacked and my phone stolen, and the DRO refused to help, which Vancouver Public School policy 5830 says that district resource officers must be involved to prevent criminal activity on or around school facilities. And several times by the DROs, by Dave Bennett, by the supervisor of security, they all falsely told me that since I was off campus, I was adjacent within 40 feet, that they could do nothing. That violates the VPS policy. It violates RCW laws that they did not provide proper identification. And most egregious is that there is.
Thank you very much. That's 3 minutes. Next, we have Laura Epton. Okay, we will check back with Laura. Lastly, we have Terry Niles. Ms. Niles, go ahead and state your name.
Oh, there you go. Okay, hi, my name is Terry Niles. I'm a resident of Vancouver. And I want to thank Vancouver School Board Directors for allowing me to be here today and to give public comment. Watching what is happening in our school board meetings and at our public schools around a simple mask has left many of us in the community very disheartened, particularly last week, as I reflected on the self-sacrifice and courage that the passengers on the United Flight 93 made on 9/11 to save American lives. When I compared it to what we are seeing happen here in our community, I literally wept. If wearing a mask would help save one life, I would gladly wear one for the rest of my life. I want to thank the school board for standing with, I believe, the majority of parents in this community in doing everything recommended by our healthcare professionals to save lives and to protect our children and their families. I would also like to thank you for your bravery in standing up to a very loud, intimidating group. I believe a very small minority that I'm saddened does not understand the pandemic and the measures that are put in place to keep our children safe. Your action seeking an injunction shows that you value our children and their families' health and are working to keep their learning environment safe and free of distractions. And I thank you for that. As the grandmother of 2 Black grandchildren and 1 disabled grandchild that graduated from Vancouver Public Schools, I also like to thank you for your efforts to make Vancouver schools a welcoming and inclusive place for all. We all realize that there is systemic racism in our county, and the Clark County Board of Health has declared racism a public health crisis. Thank you for your continued commitment to providing a just, safe, vibrant, inclusive, and diverse community. To those that are at school board meetings to disrupt, please know that there are many more like me that support our school board directors and the good work they are trying to do despite your threats and harassment. You have shown us who you are with the harassment of parents picking their children up from school, parents that made a parental decision to send their school with a mask. And so I want to just thank honestly, and sincerely thank the school board for doing what they're doing to protect our children. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Is there a Laura Upton? Okay, at this point, it's last call for sign-in for public comment. We will proceed with our in-person participation. The first person, and just as a note for those that are in the overflow room, when your name is called, you may enter the board meeting area. The first public comment is Carla Phelps.
Good evening. My name is Carla Phelps. I'm a resident of Vancouver and an employee of Vancouver Public Schools. I want to thank the school board and our administrative staff for doing all they can to keep us and our children safe. And I yield the remainder of my time to Sam Pike.
So next we have Sam Pike. Please state your name and you'll have 6 minutes.
Thank you. My name is Sam Pike. I'm a resident of Vancouver. Dr. Snell, members of the board, I come to you tonight both as a parent and an employee of VPS. My name is Sam Pike and I have a 3rd grader in Vancouver Public Schools. I'm also on the Family Community Resource Center team as the partnership coordinator. I would like to start by acknowledging that VPS sits on 57 square miles of land that is ancestral homelands of the Cowlitz people who still live on and steward this area. Of the roughly 23,000 students served in VPS, approximately 100 are Native American or Alaska Native. And to those students, as all of their peers, we owe an open and honest education, including the accurate history of the American West, the state of Washington, and the city of Vancouver. I come tonight because of a grave concern that a vanishingly small but increasingly loud and aggressive number of community members are attempting to make our schools less safe by pushing pandemic and vaccine conspiracy theories, disrupting our school day, and attempting to intimidate, harass, and vilify students, school staff, district leadership, and you, our board. Spouting anti-scientific rhetoric about masks and apparent harms towards students with no care or concern about the very real danger of an illness against nearly half of the student body who cannot yet be vaccinated, as well as no concern for their social or emotional health by pushing these false narratives that could put our district in a precarious position for staying open. I want to commend you for staying the course and holding the line. You are doing a good job of keeping our community safe. Please don't bow to the pressure of a small confrontational group of people who have not experienced true grief, harm, or oppression that so many of our students, families, neighbors, and community members have faced due to this pandemic and the attitudes of their fellow citizens. I also find it notable that this group seems to have shoehorned into their fight an obsession with critical race theory. And because many don't understand what critical race theory actually is, have used the phrase as a lightning rod against any teaching about the accurate history of racism in America, in Washington, and in Vancouver, and in our schools. The population of VPS is nearly half Black, Indigenous, and students of color, 46% at last count. Do the histories and cultures of these students not matter? Should my child, a white middle-class boy, not learn about the Montgomery bus boycott, the Trail of Tears, the redlining that persisted until the 1980s right here in the Portland metro area, or the Vanport flood? I don't consent to this. My son and all of his classmates and all of our students should learn about the rich, abundant, expansive, and sometimes painful history of their friends and neighbors, of all Americans, and of the world, positive and negative. Diversity is our strength and knowledge is our power. Acknowledging what we know to be true isn't to shame white students or make them feel bad. It is to empower all students to know that they can further our country and our world together. They can remake this world without the sins of the father. They can know their worth and know that they matter, that their friends and neighbors matter, and that their community is theirs and cares about them, no matter who they are or where they come from. Finally tonight, because folks rarely come to board meetings when they're happy about things, I want to share some successes and points of pride so we can all remember why we do what we do. Our SCRC team has worked tirelessly, often without recognition, since the start of the pandemic to mobilize resources to our most vulnerable community members. Our team has distributed nearly 200,000 pounds of food in 18 months to tens of thousands of students, family members, and community members at large. While in-person family engagement events were on hold, elementary coordinators and their teachers and other school staff exercised incredible creativity and innovation to keep families engaged with the school and their students' education, while encouraging learning concepts and social emotional well-being through reading walks, scavenger hunts, and take-home science experiments. As we opened another school year virtually last year, the FCRC team, in partnership with ITS, worked to get free internet into hundreds of homes to support student learning, opening opportunities for whole families who may have never had access or the convenience of access before. These things and many more make our district and community a great place to live, work, and raise the next generation. Let's share our strength. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next, we have Rachel Whitney. Please state your name and you'll have 3 minutes.
Hi, my name is Rachel Whitney. I live in Vancouver, Washington. Good evening, members of the board and new superintendent, Dr. Snell. I want to thank you for your time this evening. I'm a parent of children in Vancouver Public Schools, as well as VPS alumni. Go Trappers. While I didn't support the full school closure and slow return through hybrid programming, I understood the difficulties placed on the district through the state and local health departments. I advocated for opening schools with mitigation strategies in place. My family, like many throughout the district, were adversely impacted through school closures. Given the impact the last 18 months has had on students' education and social emotional well-being, I applaud the district for returning to full-time instruction, adhering to state mandates regarding universal masking. I also recognize the differing attitudes surrounding safety and concerns from community members. I understand many community members are afraid, which is often demonstrated through protesting and ongoing refusal to mask and vaccinate. The outcry is a projection of fear and lack of control of the situation. The continuing denial and refusal to believe medical experts is done out of fear. And while it is okay to be afraid, this fear is terrifying our children. As parents and community members, our job is to be brave and do what is best for the community and do your part through masking and vaccines to keep children safe and keep schools open. I want to thank you for seeking the court order prohibiting disruptive protest. As we all know, children have to be vaccinated against many childhood diseases to attend school. It was not that long ago that vaccine hesitancy created a measles outbreak here in Clark County. I urge the school board to look to Culver City Public Schools as well as Los Angeles School District regarding their recent vaccine mandate and ongoing weekly COVID testing for all eligible children. Per the San Francisco Department of Public Health, there have been no COVID-19 outbreaks in classrooms since students and educators returned on August 16th. And they have about 90% of children ages 12 to 17 who are fully vaccinated. As a result, they have been able to maintain full-time school openings with no outbreaks. While I appreciate and fully support masking and other mitigation strategies through distancing and sanitizing, the best way to keep schools open is to vaccinate. Additionally, for the safety of attendees, I hope the board considers proof of vaccine and proper mask wearing for in-person attendance at future board meetings. Thank you.
Thank you. Valerie Anderson.
My name is Valerie Anderson. After a year and a half of no full-time classroom school and 2 weeks of 4 days back in the classroom, my son finally had his first 5-day week of school. On Wednesday of that week, I received a call that he was being sent home due to a COVID exposure. It was from the football team while they were outside. I was told I would receive specific instructions as to when and how my student would be returning to the classroom. And after 24 hours and those instructions still had yet to appear, I emailed the person in charge. I was told they were still waiting for approval of their plan from the district. The instructions never came. My son missed 3 days of school for no reason. There was no contingency for remote learning while he was not allowed to attend school. I got him tested on Saturday, negative of course, and he was back in school on Monday. I expect many of those forced rolling callouts in the coming school year. I have a few questions. After an entire summer, why does the school and district not have a plan in place? After 18 months of dealing with COVID, is this something new? If students are wearing masks in the classroom, why are they not allowed to continue attending class if they are not sick, regardless of exposure? Do the masks work or don't they? And finally, how does VPS plan to educate students who are not allowed in the classrooms? After an entire school year of remote learning, are you not able to provide that option anymore? Why are there not live webcams in every classroom? Section 504 provides all students, regardless of physical or mental limitations, reasonable accommodations to access their public education. I'd like to suggest a 504 plan for each and every student in the Vancouver Public Schools, since they will all need accommodations in order to access their education as long as COVID restrictions are in place. I would also like to point out, as it seems the district has yet to formulate a cohesive plan, that vaccinated and unvaccinated students should be treated with equity. Isn't that what VPS is all about these days? What you might not know is that being vaccinated keeps one from having COVID symptoms, which actually makes it much more problematic as far as spreading COVID. While the unvaccinated get sick and stay home, those without symptoms continue about their business not knowing they are COVID positive. It makes much more sense then that any policies regarding exposure would treat all students the same. Yes, equitably. But I'll ask the same question again. Why are students sent home if they don't have symptoms? Are the masks effective or are they not?
Thank you. I'm going to ask again, no applause, no cheering, no boos, please. Next, we have Megan Gabriel.
I'm Megan Gabriel, and I'm yielding my time to my daughter, Melanie.
Melanie Gabriel. Please state your name for the record and you'll have 6 minutes.
Hi, my name is Melanie Gabriel. And if you don't already know who I am the one outside of Skyview at those rallies and protests. I just came here today to say that I'm sorry for all of the disruptance that was caused. I had no intention of any disruptance. I had no intention to put the schools on lockdown. I apologize for any parents or students who are scared of the people who are showing up. I have no control over who comes here. Everybody has a right to protest. I've tried to tell people to stop talking to students and stop interacting with students, but I really can't control what adults do. So I'd just like to apologize to all of those parents out there who are genuinely afraid of these people. But I would also like to say that my group, at least, who is out here not protesting for anti-mask or anti-vax, we're out here protesting for civil rights, because my personal civil rights have been disregarded. I have been denied my right to an education, and now they're trying to deny my right to protest as well. So I would just like to make sure that everybody knows that I'm not here. I'm here peacefully. I'm at the school peacefully. All I want is an equitable education. And all I want is to go to school with all the other kids. I don't mean to scare anyone or put anyone at risk. I've made some accommodations with my school staff that have let me keep everyone safe by their guidelines. I'm really trying my hardest to make sure that everyone's happy, but it's really hard when you're only 14 years old. So I would just like, again, to say that I'm really sorry for anyone who does feel frightened by the people who do come out. But I don't think that means that you should take your anger or whatever it is that you're feeling out on a 14-year-old girl. I'd just like to ask that we maybe stop talking to me when I'm out there, because some of the things that I've been told have been quite hurtful, and I don't come here meaning any harm. I just come to fight for my rights. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Mike Hilineo.
My name is Mike Gellinio. I am here in support of Melody. I was at the protest, and the stuff that I heard from the mainstream media, the fake news, they lied about every event, and it's just disgusting. This should not be happening. I just saw peace. There was not any problems whatsoever, but people, of course, are taking it out of context, and people have the right to have an education. And when you're not honoring somebody's 504 plan, that's a problem. When she has health issue, that's a problem. because the health issue stops her from basically wearing a mask. And I don't know what else to say, but I think you deserve her, she deserves an apology from you all, even the teachers at Skyview. And I think that she needs to be given the right for an education. So thank you.
Thank you. David Frankie?
My name is David Frankie. I'm going to start off with this district here is imposing unreasonable requirements, and there's really no justification for it. I keep hearing over the last several school board meetings, people spewing out that they don't feel good, they don't feel safe because of the mask. But there's never any real information. There's no statistics. So I'm going to give out a bunch of statistics. So PCR testing. There's talk in other districts of PCR testing. There's discussion of PCR testing being done here. Yet on July 21st, 2021, there's a lab alert that came out. The real-time PCR diagnostic panel introduced in February 2020 is being requested to be phased out by the end of this year. And the reason is because it does not differentiate between COVID and influenza, the influenza virus. November 18, 2020, there's a Danish study. This one's gone around, but it is a real study there was 6,000 participants in it. Of it, there were 4,860 people that finished it. What they found is there was no statistical differential between mask wearers and non-mask wearers. Now we heard, well, if we can only save one child. Well, I don't remember that when there was the flu. I don't remember hearing about that when car accidents. What about the suicide rate? I know a 16-year-old kid that had a very bright future, young Marine, had a lot of potential. He committed suicide. He was in isolation. I don't remember anybody saying, what are we going to do to save this one person? Nobody cared, but they're sure quick to put a mask on him. So as of today, recent, 486 total children between the ages of 0 to 18 have died, apparently because of COVID. Of course, you can't tell between influenza and COVID, but 486 children have died, and there's tens of millions of kids in this country, and we're going to stick masks on, we're going to isolate them. UK, Netherlands, France, Italy, and the Scandinavian countries have all exempted students from masks. CDC study analyzed 90,000 elementary school students in Georgia, 169 different schools. The incident rate was statistically insignificant comparing schools where students wore masks and didn't wear masks. OHSU conducted a study, and they thought they would see a flattening of the curve by wearing masks in schools after Oregon implemented a mask mandate again. No, it did not flatten the curve. They're still hoping for it though. Recent University of Louisville found masks did not help, but they did find risks, encourage dehydration, increase bacteria infections. They found in it, the British clinicians have reported masks to increase headaches, sweating, and decrease cognitive.
Thank you so much. Donna Kirkpatrick. Please state your
Hi.
name and you'll have 3 minutes.
Okay. Hi, my name is LaDonna Kirkpatrick. I want to use my time to thank Mr. Meyer and the district staff for considering what is in the best interest of all students. I also want to specifically extend the gratitude to Skyview staff and VPS Security for the additional workload they've endured in response to the disruptive demonstrations that unfortunately happened right outside their school. Demonstrations that, to put it mildly, at times tested the limits of the definition of peaceful protest. I have been engaged in the ongoing dialogue with other parents who have shared stories of harassment they and their students endured at the hands of these so-called peaceful protesters. The swift actions taken by Skyview staff and VPS to lock down the schools and maintain a higher level of security throughout the disruption was both appropriate and well measured. It's especially trying considering the bile and rhetoric that we were subjected to last week was misdirected. The mask mandate was a decision made not by the district, but by the governor's office. Based on the scientific consensus of experts and the recommendations of the CDC, the district then had no choice but to abide by the mandate to the best of their ability, given multiple alternatives that are available to the students who, for medical reasons, can't wear a mask, and those because of their parents are trying to score cheap political points. Refuse to. It is the opinion of this parent that the district has been more than flexible on the matter. We are a family that supports the mask mandate. I have 2 children at home that are not yet eligible for the vaccines. Scientific consensus continues that highlight that the efficacy of mask wearing, which works best when compliance is high. Mask arrests the wearer's possibly infected respiratory droplets before someone else can breathe them in more effectively than to prevent the wearer from inhaling other people's respiratory droplets. We wear them to protect others, not ourselves. That means we all have to do it. With the current mask mandate, and I and many other parents would have made the difficult decision to keep our kids home. Our school hallways nearly empty for another year. We can't know every child's living situation. Some have multi-generation homes and have family members with underlying conditions. Our hospitals are at capacity with COVID-19 patients. The notion that kids are naturally immune to this virus is nonsense. Pediatric hospitalizations are on the rise thanks to the Delta variant. And a baby died of complications due to COVID-19 in Oregon ICU just a few days ago. So again, thank you for protecting our students and families by continuing to comply with the governor's mask mandate. We all want our kids back in school, and we all agreed to the mandate when we opted into in-person learning.
Thank you. I just want to remind everyone, mask requirements, this is a legal requirement. Everyone needs to be wearing their mask over their nose. Lisa Parker, please.
Good evening. My name is Lisa Parker. I live in Vancouver. I just wanted to come up here and talk for a couple minutes. I also am a Vancouver public school employee, and this was my first experience back to school in a little while. And it's just been really interesting. I just think that everybody should have the choice to wear a mask. If you feel like your kids are safer or you're safer with the mask, by all means, it should be a choice. When I work in special ed, and I'm really nervous today, sorry. I work in special ed, and many of my students need to be able to see my face and see my lips when I'm talking. A lot of them have speech issues themselves, so we are constantly down in their face trying to hear what they're saying. So besides this, the speech issue is that many of them just need to see the expression, like need to see your smile, need to, when you're constantly like reminding them to pull the mask up or just to show that you're not upset with them, they really can't see the expression. So I just wanted you guys to take that into consideration. I really think that we need to have the choice on the masks. And just a reminder that, again, in Clark County, there's been 0 deaths of children 18 and under since the beginning of COVID. Thank you.
Thank you. We have Jude Helms. Please state your name and then you'll have 3 minutes.
Hello, my name is Jude Helms. I attend Columbia River High School. I am the president of the Associated Student Body, captain of the track and field team and cross country team at River. I'm here with Emma Ketfer, the vice president, and Nicolette Seibel, a member of the Columbia River soccer team. My classmates and I wish to share a concern regarding the decision to paint the Columbia River Stadium a neutral color. The stadium has been painted Columbia River colors, purple and gold, for decades. It is a valued tradition at our school, and the stadium and its connection to athletics remain an important institution at our school. The history of Columbia River is intertwined with the colors purple and gold. Columbia River as a community has been tasked with enduring heavy hardships over the course of the last 18 months. Pandemic has left many students without a sense of a high school experience. Furthermore, the ongoing construction at the school has created an environment that feels unwelcoming and creates problems for students and staff. Additionally, the change of our school name and logo during the pandemic has completely reshaped our school. While many of these things were necessary, they've left Columbia River students largely without an identity. We feel that the stadium colors act as a symbol of who we are and give us a sense of pride. On behalf of the Columbia River student body, as well as the greater Columbia River community, we ask for the decision to paint the school neutral colors be reversed and for the stadium to be repainted purple and gold. Thank you.
Thank you. Karen Erickson.
My name is Karen Erickson, and I yield my time to Marina Shaw.
Marina Shaw.
I'm Marlena Shaw, and I yield my time to Liz Kones.
I'm Liz Kones, and I yield my time to Sara Schneider.
Please state your name. You'll have 12 minutes.
I do have a question before I state my name. I don't see anything on the screens tonight. Is this being recorded, or is there a reason why it's not on the screen?
Yes, it is being recorded.
The last two meetings, it was on the screen, so I was just curious why there is no visual up there tonight.
We have continued to work on the technology, and it is being recorded, and I can see on Dr. Snell's laptop right now.
Thank you. My name is Sally Snyder. This is my third school board meeting. The madness this school year continues. OSPI just released the student performance numbers for Washington schools. At Skyview High School, the grade level standards being met for English is 63%, science 49%, and math 44%. This is pathetic. The school board contracted to spend $267,000 on equity consultants while your kids were locked out of going to school last fall. Now the board is going to spend $50,000 of ESSER funds, pandemic relief money from the federal government, in a service agreement with New Leaders, Inc. to provide professional development training to school principals. This item is on today's agenda. The action item says the following. Principals will drive instructional excellence and equity. The next steps in one own's leadership practice is to ensure practices are equitable. Develop a strong school culture, which equitable practices are at the forefront. Establish, monitor, and refine equitable instructional and operational school-wide systems and structures to increase achievements for students. Adjust plans in order to drive instructional excellence and equity, improve their equitable instructional practices, apply the instructional core as the foundation to alter teacher practice. Can anyone in this room tell me what that means? All this equity is going to impact student outcomes. Where are the examples? What does this mean? Remember, the entire school district is systemically racist per Resolution 869. Your school board decided this. Is this critical race theory? I urge you to review the CAMUS Student Policy Manual regarding equity, where it states, I will identify and disrupt my biases and my own privilege. I will dismantle
practices, and policies that perpetuate oppression. I hope you will take the time to email your school board and demand answers regarding this item on the agenda. In case you missed it, here's a brief summary of the Labor Day welcome letter from our new superintendent who came here from Camas. This is typically a time where many of us gather with family, friends, and neighbors, but it's also a risky time that may result in continued upward trend of COVID cases. To prevent further spread of the virus as our students return to school, I urge you to avoid large gatherings. Keep activities outdoors as much as possible and wear a mask while interacting with others outside of your own family. We want to be able to continue in-person learning for all students without disruption. My response to this was, I encourage the district to be mindful of their own business. What private citizens do on Labor Day weekend is determined by them, not by suggestions from a public school district that citizens interacting with their family this weekend would pose a risk to shutting down our schools. Parents, teachers, grandparents, taxpayers, the corruption is here within your schools. You know there is something seriously wrong in the education system when the governor of this state says in a live press conference for parents not to go to school board meetings because the school boards can't do anything. He told parents to call him. This from a governor who is perfectly fine with firing teachers from their jobs. You don't think the day won't come where your kids will get fired from going to school? It's already happening right in front of our eyes. Right off the district website in the first 2 weeks of this school year, 20 COVID cases, not deaths, with an abundance of close contacts, all quarantined, all missing school, and no one cares. No one cares until it's your kid. No one cares until it's your kid that can't go to school, until it's your kid that's failing, until it's your kid being shamed, until it's your kid who commits suicide. The district said this school year, no parent volunteers will be allowed in the schools unless they are vaccinated. No chaperones for field trips, no PTA, no lunch buddies, all in the name of keeping everyone safe. More discrimination on its face. The district is shaming student athletes this school year, and the school board is allowing it. If you're an unvaccinated athlete, you don't get to play basketball. Think about that for a minute. Now they're going to shame the kids some more. If you're unvaccinated and you really want to play basketball because that's been your passion, you will be coerced into having 24 COVID tests. Yep, 2 tests a week for the entire season. So if you have no symptoms, you get 24 swabs shoved up your perfectly healthy kids' nose in order to play basketball now. No psychological damage there. This is a sick world we have moved into. And if you're vaccinated, you guessed it, no tests. If you're vaccinated, you don't have to wear a mask either to play basketball. But if you're unvaccinated, you will wear the mask. No worries about all the breakthrough cases going on. No worries about all the myocarditis in boys. And no worries if you've already had COVID. And if your kids play a different sport than basketball, the rules are all different. There are even rules for choir and band. All this in the tyrannical governor's document called Sports and Fitness Guidance During COVID. All this will be monitored by trained school staff who watched a video. They are called test observers because if you choose to be coerced into 24 tests, your kids will be administering these themselves. And who is going to track all of these tests with your kids' DNA? And who is disposing of these tests? Into what database are these tests going into? Why is the school practicing medicine without a license? There are no doctors on site. And there are no nurses involved. Why are the schools becoming medical facilities? I thought schools were for learning academics. All this is child abuse. This is abuse of our athletes. This is discrimination on its face. Now the district is doing QR code tracking of kids' movement in the name of contact tracing. Stickers on chairs, on tables, on doors, all require kids to scan before they sit, scan before they move. What database does all this information go into? Who is tracking all of this information? How long are they going to track our kids' movement for? Until this is completely normalized? Wear the mask, scan your code, sit down, be quiet, and be afraid. And remember to wear the mask outside by yourself, walking down the street after school. Segregating kids now by vaccinated and not vaccinated. This is harassing kids. This is purely evil discrimination on its face, happening right here inside the walls of the school. This is not about masks anymore, or even about the loss of education again this year. This is about a school board that chooses to allow all of this nonsense to continue to happen and not do what's right for every child. No child should be subjected to anything that is going on, period. RCW 28A 320015 gives the school board members broad discretionary power to set policies. They can make policies to have mask wearing be a choice, but it doesn't appear they want to do what's right for every child. The district pursued an injunction that directly violated the federal and state constitution, saying protests cannot be within 1 mile of a school as long as the mask mandates are in place, and more, all per an attorney who wrote to the Clark County Today online newspaper. Just more discrimination on its face. Read what parents are writing in the Clark County Today. 18 months to flatten the curve? How many more months will you sit by and do nothing while this madness continues to happen to your children? It's time for peaceful protests and civil disobedience before our education system is so far gone we will never get it back from a tyrannical governor and a school board that refuses to do what's right for every child. Teach your children what civil disobedience means and model it yourself. We send our kids to school for an education, not for what they are doing to them now.
Next, we have Katie Bauer.
Katie Bauer. I was a public school educator for 13 years, so it actually pains me to say this now. Get your kids out of public school and homeschool them. Not online learning, really homeschool. I'm no expert on homeschooling, but if you'd like any suggestions, see me afterwards and I'd be happy to point you in the right direction. Tomorrow, September 15th, is the date the school districts need your intent to homeschool if you have already made that decision. If your child is enrolled and attending VPS and you decide anytime during the year to pull your child, you can then submit that form. And it's very easy to do. It's online and it's under the Learning tab on their website. And then make sure you unenroll your child because you don't want them on their VPS roll sheets. There are some Washington state requirements to homeschool. So again, see me or connect with some other homeschooling parents. If a family chooses to homeschool or send their child to a private school, that cost becomes that family's responsibility. There is no refund from the government. So then some ask, why can't the government funding follow the backpack or follow the student? Be careful what you wish for. If this becomes a reality, you might see money trickle down to you or that you'll be allowed to spend your tax dollars on the school of your choice. And then the government has its hooks in and can dictate what is allowed and what isn't allowed. Private schools that receive government funding can be told what they can and cannot do by the government. So the same would be said for homeschooling. If a family takes government funding to educate their child at home, then guess who's going to be dictating to you the parameters of homeschooling? More so now than they do, more so then than they do now. Keep in mind that there are countries that don't allow any homeschooling. Believe it or not, Switzerland is one of them. I've been going up to Olympia and speaking directly with my legislators for about 3 years regarding health freedom. I've been at this well before COVID. And now I anticipate that the next legislative session, which starts in January, we will see some genius in Olympia deciding that homeschooling should be more restricted. And we could see bills being introduced to make it more difficult for families to educate the way we see fit. Now I'm completely switching gears because I can't not mention masks. The CDC released a mask mandate effectiveness study in March of this year. News agencies went wild saying that masks are effective over and over and over again. But did any of them report the percentage of the effectiveness? How well do you think masks prevent the transmission of SARS-CoV-2? Would you continue to wear your mask if it was only 25% effective? 10% effective? What if I told you that masks are 1.8% effective? The world is masked based on the number 1.8.
Next, we have Bobby Evenson.
I'm Bobby Evenson, and I yield my time to the next speaker, Richard.
Next up is Richard Erickson. Please state your name. You'll have 6 minutes.
It's hard enough to breathe and talk with a mask on. Richard Erickson, Vancouver, Washington. Ideally, the school board functions as a nonpartisan entity in partnership with home and community. The community is speaking, but members of the school board appear to be largely deaf, dumb, and blind. The science speaks clearly. The focus in education today has not been on teaching the basics of math, science, English, and literature in K through 12. This is at least in part a direct result of this pandemic. Those individuals in the K through 12 age group suffer the fewest severe effects from COVID-19. That is what the science says, contrary to what the teachers' unions or CDC policy recommendations advocate. Let me step outside our community and read a quote that was recently in the news. And I quote, "For a full year, our children never saw one another's faces. They didn't see their teachers or their playmates. They were cut off. They were masked. Masks were mandatory in schools and in most public places. Masks were the key to fighting the great global pandemic," they told us again and again. Our public health authorities repeated that every day. So our children complied with it. They had no choice. Very few of their parents questioned it. Adults who refused to wear masks in public were arrested for it. And that sent the clearest possible message: shut up and do what you're told. So people did. There were no vaccines or approved therapeutic agents to intervene medically. How often have we been whipsawed back and forth, not by emerging science, but by the bureaucratic overreach that is beating our population into compliance using fear and panic messaging? Just crazy, crazy. Last year, the CDC put out some information comparing Sweden's mortality rate for COVID-19 to the US mortality rate for the common flu. In the group of all ages younger than 60, the Swedish mortality rate of COVID-19 was less than 1/3 of what it is for the seasonal flu in the US. Just look at the data for Jonas F. Ludvigsson that is emerging from Sweden in children 16 years old and under, when preschools and schools were kept open. And there were no face masks, though social distancing was fostered. The result was 0 deaths from COVID-19 in 1.95 million children. There is study after study debunking the utility of masking children, yet such studies are being ignored by bureaucrats and censored by mass media. The school board is supposed to be nonpartisan, but it is a fact politicians can coerce those who disagree with them. When was the decision made to abandon science? There is so much misinformation that is dishonest and manipulative put out by the federal, state, and local authorities. There is a great deal of peer-reviewed information specifically on the effectiveness, or more correctly, the lack of effectiveness of masks. You have been presented that information repeatedly. Mask mandates largely function as a form of signaling. Vaccinated people who wear masks are communicating that they take the pandemic seriously, and policymakers who insist on mask requirements are associating them with a specific political tribe. Political tribe? Specifically, those who are in the positions of political power. If you've had your COVID shots, the mask is basically Team Blue's version of Make America Great hat. If officials are more concerned with health than with partisan signals, and they should be, then the era of mask mandate must come to an end. Because I have a little bit more time, I wanted to bring to everybody's attention that there's a new study in the Journal of Infection. Scientists explain one likely reason why so many vaccinated people are getting sick. A dangerous phenomenon called antibody-dependent enhancement, or ADE, is responsible. Despite the fact that multiple medical authorities told us, and hoped ADE would not impact COVID-19 vaccines, data from the study indicates it has done just that. So if you get the vaccine and you are reinfected with it, it is a direct result of the vaccine itself. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Melissa Bergman.
All right. Good evening. Thank you for having me and creating a safe community forum. Oh, yeah, I got my stuff cool. Dr. Snell and members of the board, I want to thank you for all you're doing to keep our students and staff safe. But I want to bring to your attention how challenging it is for some families to access COVID tests. I remember reading that COVID tests will be available at students' home school, but we've yet to see them, at least at my building. I want to share there's many reasons why we do not have the tests available to those who want them. I want to encourage the board to keep this at the forefront of your minds as we share the same goal of keeping our kids safe and in-person learning. That's all I got. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Carrie Van Ostren.
Thank you for your patience. Good afternoon. My name is Carrie Van Ostren. I want to speak on behalf of the VEA bargaining team and also on behalf of an overwhelming percentage of VEA members who ratified our recent VEA VPS contract for 21 through 24. Sorry, I ran to get here, so thank you for letting me catch my breath. But I also want to express significant gratitude to the VPS negotiations team, both for the time that they committed in partnership with us and for their efforts in collaborating with us through this process. We recognize through the negotiations process in particular that we don't always see eye to eye, but ultimately the work that we do together centers around positive impacts for students and positive impacts for staff as well. I am also really encouraged to hear of progress among some of the other labor groups in ongoing negotiations and also resolved negotiations. But I strongly hope that VPS can come to a fair contract agreement with our VAESP colleagues, our classified staff members. And I recognize especially that there are key roles that all of our labor groups play in supporting students, families, and fellow staff. And I know that VPS is stronger for this united front that we bring on behalf of the Vancouver community. So thank you again for your collaboration, and I'm excited to see where we take things in the next 3 years of this contract.
Thank you. We have Luke McKnight.
Hello, Luke. Well, go ahead.
Please state your name and then you'll have 3 minutes.
All right, Luke McKnight. And I was just here to address the board mainly about the mask mandates. First of all, I don't think that they are doing much good, but that's my personal opinion and everyone's entitled to their opinion. What I find a lot of people doing is when they speak, they pull their masks down like this so people can hear them. So I imagine during the class, a lot of kids and teachers are both doing that, which completely makes the wearing the masks, no good. There's also different kinds of masks. There's these N95s, and then there's also just homemade cloth masks, which are just as good as covering up with a shirt, which isn't as good as these masks, but they aren't being regulated. So my question is, do we really care, or do we just want the appearance of caring about wearing the masks? If I was truly concerned about my kids catching a deadly virus, I wouldn't send them to school. And I would suggest any parent that has that fear to not send their kids to a public school where there's, a potential risk, if that is your personal opinion. I'm not afraid. I'll send my kids to school with no mask, no vaccinations. And that's my personal choice. And I believe personal choice is something that we shouldn't have taken away from us. I believe if you're really that scared, you should be wearing a hazmat suit with full face mask. No, I'm not joking. Teachers, if they're afraid to teach, they should be behind walls of plexiglass. If that's what makes them feel safe, they should have full respirators on, hazmat suits. If that's what makes them feel safe, because one kid in class isn't wearing a mask, that kid shouldn't be sent home. That kid shouldn't be forced to wear a mask. I can't stand to wear these masks for more than about 5 minutes. I get sweat inside of them. I couldn't imagine wearing one for an hour or 6 hours, 7, 8. I don't know how many hours these kids have to be forced to wear them. So I think it's I mean, I would go as far as to say, yes, agree with some of the other speakers and say it is child abuse. Not to mention that there's been lots of studies done where they will stick, a oxygen sensor inside the mask and show you how much carbon dioxide and recirculated air you're breathing, not to mention the psychological damage that's being done, especially to the younger kids. I have teenagers in high school, and it doesn't affect them as much, but with.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Justin Allen. state your name and then you'll have 3 minutes when you're ready.
Fantastic, thank you. My name is Justin Allen, and I know that most of y'all can't respond right now because of those rules you mentioned earlier, but please know that dang near every bit of science and law that's been proposed by those opposed to masking, by those opposed to vaccines, is utter nonsense. And I am very sorry that we all have to, and you all have to sit around here, listen to this. And furthermore, if those legal arguments had any bearing, there'd be lawsuits already. They're not, they don't. During the Spanish flu 100 years ago, we had similar people who were very irresponsible. They refused to mask up, they refused to be socially distant, and they refused to take responsibility for prolonging disease. What's happening now is no different. A very, very small part of the community is pissed off, and most of us are with you. So I thank you for standing strong. It was referred to earlier that there were some scary people when the lockdowns happened, when there was an attempted break-in at Skyview a previous Friday. Those scary people include members of the Proud Boys, an internationally organized gang. And that's not my own words. Gavin McInnes, the Canadian founder, called them that on the Joe Rogan Report like 3 years ago. Membership in the Proud Boys requires of various things, getting into fights and getting tattoos, like any other street gang in America. Let's see here. They were also the on-the-ground leadership of the insurrection on January 6th. We've all had a very, very hard 18 months, and it's going to be hard for a lot longer. I just want to thank you for dealing with some utter nonsense, and that the people of Vancouver and Clark County, the vast, vast majority of us, stand with you. So thank you.
Thank you. Molly Thomas.
Hi, thank you, Molly Thomas, citizen of Vancouver, Washington, 2 boys in public school here. So I'm actually here to talk about IT security. I was here in the July meeting to talk about kind of the issues with security for the electronic devices, which most people don't necessarily care about. But I just wanted to say something really quickly about the topics that we all keep talking about here and coming into school board meetings and hearing this over and over. I think it's really interesting that everybody comes up and has facts and nobody's facts align, right? These people say masks work, they're amazing, they're helping keep us safe. And these people say masks don't work. And both people are citing all these facts and reasons and sources. And I just want to encourage everybody to step back and wonder why our facts don't match. There's got to be a reason why there's these 2 groups of people who think they have a set of facts that aren't in alignment. So maybe take a step back from your feeling about masks and look and see what the real data is. I don't necessarily know the answer, but when you have 2 groups that are so convinced they know what the facts are and they don't align, you've got a problem somewhere. Okay, on to IT, so everybody else can go to sleep right now. I am going to formally ask that you guys provide an IT audit and security report for the amount of children that have been exposed to pornography and indecent content on their school supplied iPads. So we had an incident last year in the school where my son and some others were exposed to pornographic content. And I requested a series of actions and audits around that material and how we can know how many times that's happened and make sure that the IT security gaps are being closed. And while I understand and appreciate that you guys responded to that particular incident and kind of closed that one gap, IT security is not actually that simple, right? You need to do a holistic examination, you need to do a holistic audit, and you need to then both work with parents whose kids have been affected and maybe don't even know it. If the school hadn't seen a child in my son's class doing that, I would never have known as a parent that that had happened. So letting parents know if their kids were affected by this, and then working with IT and security experts to understand what additional gaps and closures you can make to ensure that devices our kids are using day in and day out are actually secure. So I will keep coming back and keep asking for an update on that, and feel free to email me an update. I would appreciate that as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Robert Reynolds.
My name is Robert Reynolds. Thank you, VPS Board, for hearing us. I do not envy you you're having to deal with all this, like the previous speaker just said. There's a lot of conflicting data. I can't believe that our district has now been the amazing fighting point for something that a few of us have been in the battlefront for over 3 years. I've been to DC, I've talked to Patty Murray's health aide, I've talked to Maria Cantwell, I've talked to Jamie Herrera Butler. I've been warning about this situation now. And now you don't know which way to turn, except just to listen to the governor. Mass choice is the only way to go forward. There are so many passionate feelings and the fact that we are coming to the point of talking about a insurrection at VPS at Skyview. It was about a 504 plan disagreement. One kid is being kept out of school. So please realize what this is about, and the news is not portraying this correctly. That's really all I want to say. Again, another example of the news spin taking things out of where they really need to be. Nobody asked the group in front why they were there. They simply assumed it was because they're against the entire mask mandate. Just one kid wanted to go to school. She has a reason. And there are a few others too. That's all I have to say.
Thank you. Shirley Wentworth. Please state your name and then you'll have 3 minutes.
My name is Shirley Wentworth, and I'm giving my 3 minutes to Kathy Carr.
Hi, I'm Kathy Carr, and I agree with the mom that does technology. There's a lot of conflicting information, and that's what it is right now. It's an information war. And I do appreciate the people that started with Zoom. They're backing it up by where they got it. So you can take notes and reference it. There's some things we know because we've done our studies, and so that's fine. We get it, or we know that that's not accurate. But I do appreciate, if you want us to do something, back it up with the facts. And so one thing that was touched upon here today really well that I wanted to tag team on was the CPR tests. And I spent quite a bit of time. There's a few subjects I wanted to talk on, and I spent hours today, and I was just overwhelmed by the information. And so the subject I chose was the PCR test. And we're backing up our actions with a lot of testing. And so I got my information. First of all, my daughter asked me, she goes, well, why do you, not that I care, but why am I making a stand? And it's because there becomes such a squawk. Let's check out to see what it's about. And none of us have the time that we want to be here. There's a lot of things we can be doing, but it's important to today, it's important to tomorrow and our futures, and to find out what the real truth is. So I got to where the PCR test came from. And the gentleman himself, the scientist that invented it, this is a paper from him. And I'm going to quote that. His name was Kerry Mullis. this technology that he created was to use today to test the so-called coronavirus. And he goes on in his article, and he has other scientists or doctors that back him up as a source. And what he talks early on about, and you can pull him up by name, and there's quite a bit of information about him. And it's a good article, and he does a video too, so you can read it or you can listen to the podcast. And he was concerned what they did with his PCR test after the fact when it hit the market. And he said, so he was asking the question, why? Where are you getting this information? And he says, well, they told him it was scientific studies. He says, well, whenever there's a scientific study, there is a paper, and it's referenced with a little number when you're reading the article. And so if they don't reference it, or you're talking to us about wearing masks and the data, you have to back it up with, and that'll help us move forward to make a decision. Anyway, so what is the PCR test? And quoting him and what he's done, in the early 1990s, the PCR test came into popular use, and he won a Nobel Peace Prize for that in 1993. So he won the Nobel Peace Prize, and we're questioning the testing today. And he goes on to say, it says the CPR, simply put, is a thermal cycle method used to make up billions of copies of the specific DNA sample, making it larger so you can see it. And it says the PCR is an indispensable technique with a broad variety of applications, including biomedical research and criminal forensics. And that's what he originally thought the use was going to be for it. He goes on to say the PCR cannot be totally or should never be used as a tool in diagnosis of infection diseases. He himself says it's not for that. And then going down through the article, Jason Hommel, he writes, it's scientists say the COVID-19 test kits do not work and are worthless and give impossible results. This is in his article. And then he goes down and he says, we're going to quote from Celia Farber. She's the author of Serious Adverse Events, and she wrote An Uncensored History of AIDS. And she goes on to quote, PCR is really a manufacturing technique. You start with one molecule, you start with a small amount of DNA, and on each cycle, the amount doubles, which doesn't sound like much, but if you double 30 times, you get approximately 1 billion times more material than you started with. And we're at like 37 cycles. And so what they're saying is the more that they cycle it, there's going to be more DNA that they're being able to blow up, and they can find the infection on your big toe. They can find anything. It doesn't mean that you have COVID. And so she says, Kerry did not invent a test. He invented a
Thank you very much.
very powerful manufacturing technique that is being abused.
Thank you very much. Next, we have Jake, and I cannot read the last name. Bobby.
Thank you. I don't wish to take up too much of your time. I just wanted to have a few moments to explain that I think the overwhelming under-acknowledged sentiment in the public appears to suggest that masks in our schools should be a choice. It's a concern among our community, among students, among parents. And there's an ever-shifting sense of science out there about face masks. The WHO itself has voiced significant skepticism. The CDC has walked away. There are a number of instances where we have noted that children have collapsed, fainted, and died in a school zone for 8 hours a day. Masks should be a choice. We shouldn't be banning protests. That's in violation of the First Amendment, as well as half a century of Tinker v. Des Moines rulings that protect student rights on school property. Masks should be a choice because many people feel they're necessary, but many people also, I think we've waited long enough. We should get back to our lives and our normal lives where we don't have to come to a Vancouver public school meeting to voice our concerns that we've been having about this issue. Thank you.
Would you mind stating your name for the record, please?
My name is Jake Bobe. I am a former student. I've got family who were recent graduates, just a concerned citizen. I thank you for your time.
Thank you. Alana Simmons.
There's my husband who's going to yield his time to me.
So my name is Peter Simmons, and I'm going to yield my time to my wife, Alana Simmons.
Okay. And is it okay to take the mask off just for speaking? Okay. So I'm actually here with regards to school lunches, so not with regards to masks. And I am part of a Vancouver mom Facebook group, and I polled other moms in our Vancouver school district, and there's a lot of current issues which I brought to the board and to Dr. Snell's attention. I'm an attorney at law, however, I practice in Oregon, but this is very important to me. I have a kindergartner who has autism and has special needs, and he does have a feeding plan, but many of the students in his classes do not. So the biggest issues are the early lunches with no substantive snack. My son is in kindergarten and he has lunch at 10:30, but school doesn't get out until 2:50. I brought this to the attention of y'all the day prior to school starting, and Harrison Bardo, who is the principal at Anderson, where my son attends, told me that you had agreed to implement a substantive snack with a protein in the afternoon for the kids that have such a long period before they're eating. However, I followed up with the school yesterday and that was 3 weeks ago, and they still have yet to even know about that. The vice principal knows about it, but the school staff and the office do not. And so I would urge you to follow up on that if that is truly your intention to allow for a protein snack for these kids. The other issue is the limited time for students to eat, where they're literally being given food or milk and then told immediately to throw the food or drink away. They're not allowed to take the apple or the milk with them for a later time. And this is feedback from many of the schools in the district. And I will provide you the printout of the Vancouver Moms group where people have, given me these comments, but I'm going to highlight a couple because it's so important to make sure that our kids are well fed in order for them to be able to learn and process. And I would think that a doctor would understand that. And I was very discouraged by the vague response that was insufficient to address the importance of this issue, sir. So one person says, my son is in kindergarten and was told twice the first week back to move, and that lunch was over almost as soon as he sat down. He barely comes home with any eaten and all, and apparently can't eat his food at other times during the day. Walnut Grove. Another Walnut Grove. Daughter comes home with emotional mood swings because she didn't eat or didn't get to eat enough. Someone else says, my daughter comes home starving because she wasn't allowed to have snack time. I think that is unacceptable. Someone else says, kids not getting picked up from school till the second bus comes around
These kids are going too long without eating. Another person, my kindergartner is at Minnehaha, so they eat early. I do feel that they have a very short time frame to eat and is sad, nothing else until they get home, especially for the second round of bus services. Someone at Lincoln, she's been complaining that she doesn't have enough time to eat. Her lunch is always only half eaten when she gets home starving, and she's a fast eater. Someone else says she has thrown away untouched fruit or unopened milk because breakfast or lunch was over. It would be nice if she could at least stick the banana or apple in her backpack. I'm not sure what time her lunch break is, but she's usually always hungry when I pick her up. Another one, it's especially worrying at Title I schools where there are many children whose main meal of the day will be their free school lunch. They need that time to eat. It might be the last meal of the day for them. Someone else, I honestly can't believe they only have 20 minutes for kindergartners to try and finish lunch. My son has sensory issues and takes a little longer to eat and has come back home with all of his lunch unpacked, uneaten every single day since he started. It's very upsetting when he's already so skinny. And that particular mom I've reached out to and offered to be a peer mentor because her son, like mine, has autism. And that's unacceptable for these children to be not allowed to eat their lunches and to go so many hours, especially if they're not getting home until 4 or 5 in the evening and having lunch at 10:30. Another one, the lines for school lunch are so long that by the time the last kids get up there, lunch is over and food is already gone. And so I will pass these along, and I'll just do a couple more. My kids take a lunch with them every day and come home starving with only a few bites of their lunch taken. They get 15 minutes, not nearly enough. Need time to fuel their bodies up so they can focus on what they're supposed to be learning rather than their grumbling tummies. So many complaints of all three, elementary and middle school, of my kids that they can't finish their lunches that I pack for them and even asked to be thrown away whatever they have left, like WTF, I made that. So it's, sorry, these are quotes. But my point is, it's not even just the hot lunches, it's even families that are sending their kids with lunches that are also being told to throw away. And people don't know that. And if your son or daughter is not verbal or has sensory issues, they're not going to be able to tell us parents that, especially since we're not allowed to be in the classroom right now to volunteer. And so that's why, even though it doesn't affect my son directly with his feeding plan, it's a very important issue. Last two, my kindergartner was saying that they gave her milk at lunch, then made her dump it out right after because lunch was over, right after they put it in her hand. Last one, my boys eat a good breakfast and aren't hungry at 10:30, but starving by noon. And my kindergartner wasn't too happy about having to dump his lunch for running out of time the last 2 days. He just wanted to keep his apple and was told no. They're at Anderson as well. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. That concludes our public comment portion for the night. I do appreciate everyone's cooperation. As we transition to our business portion of the evening, so the first item on our business portion of the meeting is the approval of minutes. This is for a special board meeting on March 3rd, a special board meeting on March 8th, a regular board meeting on March 9th, a special board meeting on March 16th, and a special board meeting on March 18th. Do I have a motion?
I'll make the motion.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
And I'll second.
Okay, thank you. Director Smith? Approve? Director Barrows? Approve. Director Decker?
Approve.
Director Zavala?
Approve.
And I also approve. The next portion of our agenda is our consent agenda, both our instructional and administrative support services and our fiscal services. And just as a reminder, we reviewed these as a committee of the whole August 17th. We went through all of these items. Do I have a motion?
I'll motion.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. Director Zavala?
Approve.
Director Decker,
Approve.
Director Barrows,
Approve.
Director Smith. Approve. And I also approve. So we are moving on to our regular business. The first item on the agenda is the recommendation to conduct a first reading to adopt revised policy 2420, homework grading and progress reports in the 2000 series.
Yeah, we have a series of policies that the board has been reviewing, and in the last committee of the whole, I think, walked through these. There is a past precedent of waiving the reading and then bringing these back on October 12th for approval as a batch. I know that the board has some interest in discussing potentially policy 1400. Was one that there was some discussion that would be helpful for staff to understand where you are at with that policy, so that we can bring a second reading to you with your feedback.
That sounds.
So we can go through each one individually, or we can do a batch and approve and then pull out 1400 for discussion.
Would anyone like to make a motion to pull 1400 out? And
I will make that motion to pull out 1400 for discussion.
I'll second that.
So we can go ahead and move forward all of the others that we have waived the readings. So Director Smith.
Are we approving?
We are approving all but 1400.
It's a first reading.
It's a first reading.
Okay. Approve.
Approve.
Director Decker
Approve.
and Director Zavala.
Approve.
And I apologize if my syntax there was a little off, but we are waiving the reading on all of those except for policy 1400.
So just as a summary, policy 1400 is related to board meetings, conduct, decorum, kind of official business and order of business. And in that, there are a series of changes that I think the board as a whole is supportive of renaming some of the processes that better reflect what actually happens in those processes. So in the notations, you'll see strike throughs of workshop and new language that better reflects what the board had shared those meetings are for. The place that there was discussion about is in particular public comment, and specific to that was the requirement of stating an address when you give public comment. And so the discussion was requiring potentially an address that was when you sign in on the documentation that you would like to provide public comment, but not necessarily requiring the speaker in front of everyone videoed to state their address. And so there was thoughts on both sides of that. So I would just open it up for discussion. And then as a staff, we want to process that discussion and bring a second reading forward to you.
I wanted to open it up to feedback. Director Decker, it looks like you're ready.
Sorry. So for those watching and those who are new to how we are running school board meetings now and aren't aware of how they were run in the past, our school board meetings, until we actually, many of us were sworn in, were not recorded. They were audio recorded, but they were not visually recorded. And at some point, you couldn't even obtain the audio without requesting it. It wasn't necessarily published. So when a few of us were recently, less than 2 years ago, sworn in, we started a process to have the school board meetings recorded visually. And then the pandemic happened, and then it became necessary. So prior to the visual recording, having somebody get up and declare their address didn't seem so daunting, because nobody was going to see, and very few people were going to hear what their address was. Now that we are visually recording and these are being posted, it can prove to be feel like a safety issue for some people, especially in our current political climate. So when we were discussing this, The flip side, though, is that we want to make certain that when people get up to speak, that they are actually representing our community, that they aren't coming from outside of our community. And I think everybody would agree that particularly at a school board meeting, the people we want to hear from are the members of our community, not necessarily some lobby company or whatever. And I think as parents, that's what you would want. So we want to have some ability to contain who speaks, although we want to hear from everybody, but we want to make sure we know who's speaking. And so I think that for safety, we don't want them necessarily to give their physical address, but when they sign up, to give their address so we know that they are actually representing our community. That went very long, I'm sorry. But I felt like it was important for people who are just now becoming actively involved in what's going on at a school board meeting to realize that there was no ability to view or to even really hear what had gone on at the school board unless you came to the school board meeting.
Is there any other feedback or thoughts on this?
I personally do not think that we need to change our policy in this specific instance with changing the requirement of requiring an address. Stating your name and address is a very common practice in public meetings, whether it's school board, city council, any type of public comment. I think for what you're talking about, understanding that, who is speaking, how they are, related to the community. In thinking about the purpose of public comment, the purpose of public comment is to give feedback to the board, not necessarily to present to an audience. It's to give feedback on some specific issues or topics to the school board. And we have multiple ways to bring those topics up. So if somebody is concerned about publicly giving an address that would be, shown on a YouTube video, we have other ways, such as emailing the board. We at times will get phone calls. There's lots of different ways to reach out and express concerns to the board. So I don't necessarily think that we need to make a change at this point in time.
I appreciate that. I mean, tonight we had an hour, almost 2 hours of public comment. I think for me there's absolute value in understanding how an individual is our stakeholder and how they are connected and why they care about an issue in order to come to a meeting. But in every instance tonight, even that connection to Vancouver Public Schools, whether they were staff or whether they were parents, whether they were an alumni, a concerned citizen, that kind of bubbled to the surface of their presentation. It does add a lot of value to me hearing comments if I understand how they're a stakeholder. I think in this political context, I want everybody's voice to be able to be heard. And I do know that safety and the presentation of one's address on a recorded, if that's a barrier to anyone or might intimidate anyone from being able to feel confident speaking to the board in a public meeting, I just want to remove those barriers.
I think I agree with both Tracy and Kyle. I don't know. I feel like it's part of I'm more than sure that when we go up to the state, right, to the Capitol, you have to provide your address. I'm, in open meetings. But I also understand, I think where we are right now in the climate. I mean, speaking personally as a candidate, also having to provide your address is very scary, but it's public information. So, but at the same time, it's part of the job, right? So I think Tracy's right. We have other ways of communicating to us if you don't feel comfortable being in the public meeting. But I also see it as a barrier, so
But I do feel like it's important for us to have some way of of our constituents providing their address. If it is on the sign-up sheet, I think that's great. I think it's also important for us to know where our speakers are coming from.
I think it's my turn. I think that the sort of compromise that Kathy has offered, I think is a smart one. There is value to hearing from people who may not be in our district. They may have a perspective that helps us. But there is also value to being able to put that context into place and understanding where they're coming from and how they do connect or relate to our district, whether they're in or outside of the district. I think I like the idea of being able to reference that address, but not necessarily have it publicly declared, especially on a recording that we read later, even months or years later. So I like Kathy's proposal of maybe having it written, but not necessarily stated outright.
So I guess I have a clarification then, because the draft that we have in front of us just indicates, I'm scrolling to where it is. Okay, so it does include this signing up with their address, and then they need to publicly state their name and whether they reside in the district. Okay, I was making sure that the signing up with their address was it.
I'm going to ask a clarifying question. Does it just say whether they reside in the district? It doesn't say that they have to state their name.
It just says before speaking, a person should state whether they reside in the district.
So they don't necessarily have to give their address in their during their speaking. Right.
Yeah. The proposed change says persons addressing the board must sign up with their name and address. Before speaking, persons should state whether they reside in the district or not.
Thank you. I just wanted to clarify that I heard it right.
And I will say, most people do sign up with their address, and it might require just a little bit more attention on that, but are people comfortable with that, or?
I think we have enough as staff to take edits and put that together for the second reading, and then you guys can vote on what we put together. And if you don't like it, we'll go back to the drawing board and come up with something else. I appreciate the thoughtfulness that you're giving to it. I know that, we hear a lot of diversity of opinion, and I know that this board has been consistent in trying to figure out ways to consistently engage. And so I appreciate that. We'll take that, and Marilee, we got what we need, right? Yes. Okay.
Thank you.
And so I think we may need to move that one to second reading after the discussion, because that wasn't a part of the bunch that was approved.
Okay, so do I have a motion to move that policy 1400 to second reading, and there will be additional revisions next month?
So moved.
Oh, second.
Second.
Okay. Director Bauer?
I approve.
Director Decker?
Approve.
Director Barrows?
Approve.
Director Smith?
Approve.
And I also approve. Yeah. And with that, we have the superintendent's report.
Thank you. And for those following along at home or for the record later, the report is linked here with information in the slides that will be available to people. There's four main areas that I want to speak to tonight to the board. The start of the year, our regular COVID-19 update. Unfortunately, we've had that a part of board meetings for a while now. Janelle is going to give us an equity policy timeline update, and then I wanted to review the bond update with you. At any point in this, please I'll pause at each of those topics, and then if you have comments or questions, please feel free to interrupt. So logistics have been a common, theme of starting the school year. I just want to compliment staff, our families, our students. We had a long time gap between when we were bringing all 20,000 students onto campus every day. And there was a lot of effort and planning in bringing that to fruition. And we're just really grateful to have kids in person. As we've heard tonight from different speakers, that our kids are just fantastic. They bring such a joy and energy to what we do. It's our purpose. And so all those logistics make it worthwhile. As I've been out to schools, and I know our central office administrative team has been really focused on trying to be present in our schools, we're just noticing a lot of excitement. And even though we certainly wouldn't like to have masks and be able to see those smiles of joy, you can sure see them from the eyes of the students. They're excited to be at school, and our staff are excited to support them. So that has been a common theme. I think some celebrations of opening new schools like Walnut Grove and the Jim Tangeman Center. And I know the first day, we're always a little nervous about traffic patterns. And so there was a lot of people at Walnut Grove and a lot of cars on the road waiting to come in, and just stories of being able to escort students to class, and family pictures of family members, I think in one instance from Texas, that were up there to see their student off to school. So just a lot of excitement in opening these facilities. And then also some challenges, and with any challenge, opportunity. So challenge, I think number one is staffing, is that we don't have the staff that we would need in terms of numbers. We definitely have the staff in terms of quality. But this isn't unique to us in public education. I recognize that all of business and industry are really struggling to find the number of staff members to execute their mission. And from driving our buses this year, we've had to do some double runs, which has caused students to be at school a little earlier and getting home a little later, and that's not ideal. So we want to continue to try to dial that in and find the best efficiency we can. To having openings in our schools, in particular with classified support for students served through IEPs, and not, having those positions posted, but not being able to fill those yet. And so it's a real challenge right now, but we also see on the other side that there's opportunity as we look at our systems, and we have to figure out how to do buses differently. And so maybe coming out of the other side of this, we're stronger for going through this. But really appreciate the patience of staff and students and families as we work through this. Shifting gears a little bit to the COVID-19. So before I do that, I'll just pause and see if there's any questions or comments on the start of the school year.
I just want to say, I just want to say that I'm just so thrilled with all the effort that all of the staff and all of the parents have put in to bringing these kids on board and making sure that people feel safe. And you would expect that after so much time having gone between all these students being, that there'd be some huge debacle that nobody thought of, or what, and that wasn't the case. And to all these people that are behind the scenes, thank you so much. Because of you, and then the principals, and then the teachers, that all of this happened not entirely seamlessly. We are talking about children, but seamlessly enough that everybody's just so happy to be back to school. So thank you.
I just want to ditto the appreciation. I have the pleasure of doing drop off at 3 different schools, which is sometimes logistically challenging. But I think the energy has been really great the last 3 weeks, and it's credit. I honestly want to give our families a lot of kudos too, because there's been a lot of flexibility as we work through some of the logistical challenges. But I think there is a community appreciation for this opportunity to be back in school. I think the kids are just so happy to be back in school that it's a really positive energy. So thank you to everyone who's been involved, and thank you to our families.
Okay, I'll continue with the update. So related to COVID-19, there are some guidance related to athletics that the WIAA and the governor's office have provided. And so we heard from public comment tonight that those guidelines are different for different sports, and that commenter is exactly correct. They are different for different sports because they have categorized the sports by risk area. And so the higher the risk area, the more prescriptive the requirements are related to those activities. And so we continue to monitor those. We have a great team at the district level that looks at those and supports the schools and the athletic directors and the coaches. And then our athletic directors meet as a region, because what we do in our schools affects what the other schools do in the league that we participate in. And we're a unique district because we actually serve a lot of different leagues because of the size of our high schools. And so we partner with a lot of different districts. And so we want to make sure we're on the same page with them. The mandatory masking for spectators is a brand new requirement that the governor talked about last Thursday. And there's a trigger for that of 500 plus capacity events. Outdoors, regardless of vaccination status, is a masking requirement. And no matter how you feel about masking, I hope that people have empathy with the people who are following the requirements and having individual conversations over and over again with people who see it from a different perspective. So I am so appreciative of our DROs and our staff that are on site that are kindly reminding people of the requirements that we have to meet. Otherwise, we jeopardize the funding that makes these things possible. So these folks on the front lines are so professional. And one of our commenters tonight spoke about DROs in a way that was, I guess, in my opinion, a little derogatory. And I have the privilege of being on site during these events and trying to support this team. And I have seen them getting yelled at in their face. And I hear on the radio in the earpiece, these colleagues talking to each other and telling each other, stay calm, stay professional, be kind. This is what our staff are telling each other in really hostile situations. So I would be remiss without complimenting the professionalism of these folks that are on the front lines that are really trying to allow us to continue to have in-person learning. And so I appreciate them so much. And I've greatly benefited from the opportunity of working with them over the last couple of weeks. The vaccination requirement of all of our staff and also of our volunteers, that was mentioned in public comment tonight. We are following the same guidance. If folks are coming on our school to work or to volunteer, then we do have a vaccination requirement, and there is also an exemption process that volunteers and staff can go through. It's an enormous effort. Kathy Everidge and her team are doing tremendous work in trying to support our staff in understanding the requirements and being able to provide the evidence that we need so that they can continue employment. So lots of work on that front. I want to speak a little about county rates and contact tracing, and I have some visuals related to that. You guys are probably getting tired of this slide. I will celebrate when I no longer have a COVID update and no longer show these kinds of data points with you. And there will be a day when that happens, and we will get there sooner than later. I keep telling myself that. As you can see, the good news is that our curve is, for the first time, starting to flatten its trajectory. And so hopefully we will start to see similar patterns as we did before, where the curve will flatten and then we'll see some relative lower rates, which would be a real positive. The last several weeks have been really challenging for our staff and our community and our hospitals, as we know. We are tracking and trying to communicate with the public these rates. These were referenced tonight as well. These are updated every Wednesday on the district dashboard. And if you're curious, you can actually look at last year's dashboard as well to see how we're trending with this. And unfortunately, we're trending with more cases to start the school year. On the side here is also what we do for the school notification, and that's updated daily. So as a parent, you might want to know what's going on in the school, or you might hear that there was a case, and you might not be notified because you weren't a close contact, which is a good thing, but you still might have concern. And so these are updated daily by our team so that you know if there was a case at the school, and that could be information that's important for your family. So we're trying to provide that. The flow charts were also referenced this evening. And I tell you, another group of employees are the folks that are one, communicating to families that you're a close contact. That is not a message that any parent wants to hear. I think many of us have probably heard that. If you have students in the school, it's happened. I know my student was a close contact, and you immediately have a lot of questions, right? And any family member that's in that situation is going to want to know and ask. And so every one of these conversations takes a while. We want to make sure that the family understands what's happened and what are the next steps. And what are the next steps? It's really complicated. And it's dictated by Clark County Public Health. And so these are approved by Clark County Public Health. And each scenario you walk through, each close contact to determine what is the next step. And so our staff are trained on this and they try to work on it every day. And every single situation is a little unique. And so today in our principal meeting, I know Mr. Gray was working with principals around COVID updates, and there were a lot of scenarios that principals were presenting. What happens in this situation? Can we get some support in that situation? Our goal is to be as consistent and as efficient as we can be, and to have students in school. So this is a real complicated layer that I wanted to make sure that you were aware of. Also, the other complexity is that we continue to get updates. So we received an update yesterday from the Department of Health. Largely, this isn't changing any of the guidance, but it is providing additional information about strategies to try to reduce the transmission risks and try to minimize the amount of time for students to be outside of school. And so we are reviewing this as a team. I was on a state call with Superintendent Reichdahl today, and he pointed out some places in particular that he would like us to pay attention. And it is about close contacts. That's a trend that we're hearing across the state, that trying to manage that is really challenging. And then this slide I keep as an anchor point. I know people are sometimes frustrated around decisions, and you have some authority as a board, and then you have some places that you do not have authority as a board. And so I know that you're glad to listen to these concerns, but in many cases, you have no authority to do anything about those concerns. So this is just an anchor point. I think you've seen it many times, so I won't spend any more time on that. And I'll pause for questions about the COVID-19 update.
Kind of going back to the dashboard, I appreciate that data. I appreciate the district posting that data. Just for transparency, there was a great article in the Columbian today about kind of all of our local districts and their data dashboards. I think the thing that I appreciate also is including whether it was a school transmission, because that's something, I mean, I know we're going to have cases in our schools, but that school transmission column is the one I keep an eye on, because I think when we start seeing, if we start seeing that trend, I think that's where concern might arise that, we're having outbreaks in our schools. So I appreciate all of the data that is just right there on the public website for everybody.
And if I may, Tracy, related to that, you're absolutely right. That school transmission number is one that Clark County Public Health is paying attention to weekly in our conversations. So we still meet as a region every Monday. And that was, everyone went around, all the Cowlitz and Clark County superintendents, and shared what those numbers were. The good news is that the transmission in schools is still down, which I think in a climate where a lot of cases are clearly happening in the community, it's a testament to our staff and our students really being careful and following the mitigation strategies. So I'd like to invite Janelle Ephraim forward to give you an update on the equity policy timeline and work that's going on.
All right, thank you and good evening. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to just share some of the timeline with you. In VPS, we know that student equity is about meeting the individual needs of each of our students. And so we know that an equity policy, your commitment to establishing an equity policy is going to help guide our daily work, help guide our decision-making around what we need to do for students so that we can get the outcomes that we're looking for. So our timeline, actually the board committee will begin to draft the policy tomorrow. So the time is upon us. And after that policy is drafted, our Equity Advisory Committee will review it at the end of the month. They'll provide feedback. Once they provide feedback, it will come back to you all so that those recommendations can be considered and changes made. But what I want you to pay close attention to in this particular timeline is the community voice piece. So after our board committee has an opportunity to see that policy twice, that that's when we'll begin to engage our stakeholders in the community. So we'll have the draft policy available on our website, and folks can give feedback as needed. We'll also have some listening sessions aligned with our teacher parent conferences at the end of October. Just really wanting to make sure that we hear the diverse perspectives that are present in our community, because we know that what equity is about honoring the diverse perspectives that are present. Our end goal really is to have a policy voted on by the end, at the beginning of February 8th. And so there are a lot of opportunities for our board and our community to engage. When we look at November, that will be the first time. November 16th will be the first time that our community will have an opportunity to view the actual policy publicly at one of these meetings. But that won't be the last time, of course, for feedback. It'll go back then again for feedback. And then in December, after that feedback is considered, final edits will be made, and a first reading will be available for January 11th at that public board meeting, and then voted on February 8th. Are there any questions about the timeline?
I don't have a question, but I just want to thank you for kind of laying out this timeline for us, as well as just the thoughtfulness that you've put into kind of all of the steps. I especially appreciate the multiple opportunities for community feedback, because I know that's something that we really value, is getting that feedback. And I know our community also has been asking for ways to provide their feedback through more engaging opportunities. And so I appreciate you putting forward that option, especially multiple times, because there's going to be different ways and multiple steps, either through listening sessions or when it's presented at the workshop, and then public comment, and just different ways for our community to let us know what they think, so that it's not just something that we as a board want to look at, or a small, like the equity advisory group or district leadership team, but it really kind of reflects the values in our community. So thank you.
All right, thank you.
I'm just thankful that there's time to really be thoughtful about this. I think when we really kicked off this with you this summer, wanting to make sure that our end date was far enough out that it could have all of these steps. So thank you for working through kind of a very intentional timeline. And I'm excited to see the work begin.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Janelle. The last part of this presentation tonight is around our bond update. And just for some context, this work was started back in February of 2017 with what ended up being over $500 million invested into our community. One, through the local support of our community and the bond passage, and then two, through matching funds from the state. And so it's a huge investment in our future, and we're really grateful that the community would step up and support us with that. Our district is really blessed with great resources and facilities for our students, and we've had to use them a lot differently over the last 2 years, but they'll be with us for a long time. So this fall, I mentioned earlier, the Jim Tangeman Center, which used to be called Fir Grove School, right across the way here, has moved a little further west and is located to the GATE program. That opened up, and we're going to have the grand opening here at the end of September for the community. We'll follow whatever the COVID guidelines are at the time, but allow people to get in and see that facility. It's amazing. And I know Daniel Bettis is a little jealous, our Executive Director of Special Services, because he was a longtime principal at Fir Grove and did amazing work. But the facility didn't really reflect the quality of students and staff in the way that it could, and now it does. It's awesome. And then, as I mentioned earlier, Walnut Grove opened. I want to give credit to the team there. One, the staff for being flexible, And then AJ Panther and the rest of the crew from operations and working with the city, the actual permit came in the day of the first day of school. So it was a little stressful to try to make sure that everything was lined up. And it doesn't seem to matter in my experience of building schools, how long you have, it's always at the end. And I think that's maybe true for us in our own lives too, as we have projects around our house, but it'd be nice if those would happen a little sooner. And there's some great images of these two amazing facilities. We also have done just a lot of improvements to campus, and we had our Columbia River students speak today to some of the remodeled things that are happening at Columbia River High School, and the 500 wing is set to open soon. We'll hopefully break ground on the 800 wing. And then we did remodel that stadium there. And he spoke so eloquently about painting the colors. I just want to remind and give some context for that, that's actually not just Columbia River Stadium, but a district stadium. And so they came up with a real great idea to paint neutral, but put in some amazing lighting that gives the stadium the purple and yellow that he was talking about, but then also allows, let's say if Fort Vancouver is hosting a playoff game up there, that it's not purple and yellow. And if they happen to welcome a school that's purple and yellow down, it doesn't feel like it's their home, right? So we can change those lights to be red and gray when Fort is there, or black and yellow if that Bay is gonna host. We're fortunate to have the Keegan's Bowl as a facility, and then also the Columbia River Stadium. And Keegan's is one of the things that's ready to play. It's not necessarily ready on all the facility front, as we're still doing improvements there. The Heights campus is underway. VSAA is, I still have a hard time figuring out how to get into that building these days because of the construction that's going on there. As I walked in yesterday, they have a bike corral right outside the main office as they're just trying to make do as the construction is finished, and really excited about the finished product in these areas. And then also, I think the district has done a great job prior to me getting here of really thinking about how to repurpose facilities. So an early childhood clinic as well is part of the improvements. So the last piece that I wanted to share with you is Ruth Bader Ginsburg. And we had hoped that when this bond was set out back in 2017 and all the projects were put together, that we would actually welcome students to Ruth Bader Ginsburg in the fall of 2022. Sorry about that. But unfortunately, that's not going to be possible. There are some real challenges to supply chains as a result of the pandemic. And when you can't get steel joists for 10 to 12 months, it's pretty hard to build a school. When you don't have steel decking, when you don't have things like paint dyes and fabrics, it's not going to happen. And so I know that AJ spent some time with each of you as board members to kind of walk you through the process. We are still on schedule for VITA, but we are looking at a fall 2023 opening for RBG Elementary. So that's the last of the bond. So I'll pause again and see if you have any questions about that or comments.
I just wanted to comment on the delay with RBG. I know it's very disappointing, especially to the community that it would benefit the most, those people that live in that area. There are houses going up, or more critically, apartment buildings in the later stages, which means increased enrollment. But I know, and our community is such a builder's community, so I believe that all our builders out there and people that work in construction understand how the supply chain is just a mess, and that if we could, we would totally be opening this on time. But there is, as Dr. Snell said, we can't even get the joists for almost a year. So it's very disappointing. We were heartbroken when we first heard it, but you can't build a school without the materials. So we'll move on. So thank you.
Well, I think in many of our professional contexts, we're experienced with COVID-related supply chains, just, we have to be fluid and flexible. I'm particularly excited for the Jim Tangeman dedication at the end of this month. I had the privilege of going and touring it in May, and it is state of the art. So perhaps now we have another dedication next fall, since Ruth Bader Ginsburg will be delayed. Silver linings. Thank you.
The last thing I had in the superintendent's report is we also heard in public comment this evening mention of the injunction. And I just want to let the board know that I appreciate your support. I think you have communicated consistently that you want opportunities for people to share their opinion. You have a 3-month track record of listening to opinions shared at our board meetings. When we looked at what was happening at Skyview High School, and some reference tonight to people that were coming onto campus that maybe didn't have an idea of what this was about, and we certainly saw interactions that alarmed us, and people coming onto campus and not staying on the sidewalk. Also, the sidewalk itself being, basically a 4-foot stretch on a very busy road with buses and walkers and joggers and drivers. And a lot of angry people out there. And we have looked across our country this year and in the past several years, and we've seen how protests that have started peaceful have turned violent. And we certainly do not want any student or staff member or community member hurt. And I know that the direction you gave in the support was about thinking about safety first for our community, and recognizing that we want to hear diverse voices. But no one wants somebody to get hurt on our site or near our site. Our kids are so precious to us. And so I just wanted to let you know we appreciate your support. It's not an easy thing to do, to stand up and say that we think that this is important enough that we're going to go to the Clark County judge and we're going to ask for them to review it and tell us if we're on the right track with this or not. So I want to acknowledge your leadership with that, and then also allow anybody to ask questions or comment around that.
I'm a little hesitant to speak because I keep speaking, but as a mother of a news reporter, I kind of feel the First Amendment is so critical. And I totally believe that we should have an opportunity to peacefully protest. But I also want to add that I spoke with at least a half a dozen Skyview students in the last 3 days. No, I didn't seek them out. They sought me out. And they wanted to let me know that they were thankful that we were supporting their their ability to learn in a safe environment. And just knowing that we kind of had their back helped when they saw the disruptions that were going outside. And they were disruptive. There were times when the kids could not concentrate. And so I think if those high schoolers are seeking board members out to tell them, then that is an indication that that peaceful protest was not as peaceful as some people think it was. So while the First Amendment is near and dear, as a school board director, children's safety is incredibly important. Go ahead.
No, I think in considering this approach, safety really comes as the first and foremost priority. I mean, we're here for the students. We're all here for our students. And just putting on my parent hat, the idea of adults without maybe connection to the schools who are coming on property, banging on windows, attempting to open doors, whatever the situation may be, even with the intent of a peaceful protest, it's unnerving. We just have too many examples around the country where, we need to prioritize student safety. I welcome participation at board meetings. We've sat for hours the last few months, and this is a really appropriate format to have adults speak to the board and share their concerns and their frustrations. But I think that we should be very cautious when we have these protests at school. But so I thank the leadership, the district resource officers for supporting our Skyview team.
I wanted to just take a minute to thank you, Dr. Snell, for your leadership in all of this. I also want to thank you for kind of all of the information that you have provided in your superintendent report, not just on this specific instance, but with the COVID update, update on the start of school, having Janelle share about that update on the equity policy. I wish more people were here to hear these updates. I know there's probably a lot of people, but I appreciate that you are addressing some of the concerns that we hear in public comment, because I know that is something that a lot of our community members have expressed, that they give public comment and then don't hear a response. But you are in fact providing updates and addressing some of these concerns. So I just want to thank you for your thoughtfulness in the information that you share, not just with the Skyview update, but all of the context around the superintendent report.
Well, I was going to thank Dr. Snell too, but I reiterate everything that's been said. I mean, our First Amendment rights are so important. I'm a civics teacher. I literally was teaching this today in class. We were talking about Tinker v. Du Bois today in class. One of the things that I tell my students is that one person's rights cannot supersede another. And so while our right to protest and our freedom of speech is so, so important, equally as important is our students' right to access their education. And when it becomes a disruption and it infringes on that right, that's the problem. And so I want to thank Dr. Snell again for your leadership. I also want to acknowledge Principal Meyer at Skyview, who has had a really rough time. And I really appreciate his leadership as well as the rest of his team at Skyview. That's not an easy role to be in. And I just wanted to let him know and his team know that we all see him and his work, and we really appreciate all of his efforts to keep our students safe and to keep that education moving forward.
With that, we are complete for the night. We are adjourning to executive session with no action to follow for the purpose of discussing the performance of a public employee.